It's time for another edition of Tech Briefs, where I am joined by the technology editor of Flipboard, Mr. Ken Yeung. Ken standing by on his location. I'm here at my location, but we're still going to bring you up to date on some of the news that's happened over this last week as best as possible in 10 minutes. And I think to start off, Ken, let's talk about some of this social media aspects and some of the different ways that people are actually, trying to combat misinformation that is out there. There's so much of it.
Absolutely. So, look, coronavirus isn't going to keep us apart, Greg. We're going to keep doing this show for many, many weeks to come. But here's the thing with coronavirus: social media platforms are always facing this whole notion of misinformation, whether it's talking about democracy and elections or even coronavirus. And in this time when people are self-quarantined, they're at home, they're like at a loss for information. They're going to look at the internet. And they're going to look at platforms such as Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube to find the very latest. And as we all know, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be spouting opinions, whether they're right or wrong, but they're not necessarily the experts. And there are some that are going to be doing it for malicious purposes themselves. So this is actually going to be what Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and many other companies are doing, are setting up portals or hubs on their platforms that are prominent in places when you're talking about content around coronavirus. And they're going to help direct you to the Centers for Disease Control or the World Health Organization's website to get you the very latest about what's going on. Now, Facebook says they're at war. This is all hands on deck, according to Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg. So that's actually they're going to be very proactive in that. They've actually been very forthcoming with the media. Twitter themselves earlier this week has also said, look, we're going to ban a lot of this type of stuff to these armchair doctors. Of course, when you look at Elon Musk, for example, tweeted out earlier saying that kids are immune to coronavirus. I mean, that's not necessarily true. I mean, the facts are still in dispute. But Twitter said, look, we're not going to remove that tweet. So it's like you say it, but how are you actually enforcing it?
And exactly, I think that's a perfect example of that too. Is that's something that if you're going to stop armchair doctors, which I like that term, and I think we've all have probably encountered an armchair doctor in our lives. That's one that definitely should be removed, even though it's Elon Musk. I mean, he is not a doctor. He does not have valid information on that. We don't know if that's true. So yeah, you'll have to see how this is all enforced. And that's always one of those things that feel like there's a lot of grand statements about it and great statements, in association with trying to control misinformation, but how it's actually handled and implemented, that's always the question. But that's one side of things. So there's definitely a lot out there and a lot of companies banding together saying they are going to battle it. So maybe they'll get better and better with it as they go through. Continuing on here, though, just talking about how this is affecting all kinds of different things in association with tech. A lot of us are ordering things online right now. I mean, primarily that is going to be how we're going to be getting a lot of things, and you need things like Amazon warehouses. For that, there's a couple of things in association with Amazon. One is that they're prioritizing important items. So some of the peripheral items are not going to be stocking, so it's going to be kind of more emergency supplies and things that people actually need. But also there's a report that there was an Amazon warehouse worker who was diagnosed as infected with this coronavirus, and that could be a little bit concerning.
Sure. Yeah. As you said, everyone's ordering off of Amazon. They're with states such as California and now New York essentially in lockdown. People are going to be worried about what's going to happen. I think that the thing to remember amongst all of this, whether there's an Amazon worker that's test positive, and that's unfortunate. What the government has said and what experts have said is that there is not going to be a supply chain disruption. So this whole hoarding and this move to rush out and buy everything is not necessarily a good thing. But I mean, as we look at, as we're talking about earlier, yeah, everyone's ordering on Amazon for their needs. They don't want to go out, and they're worried about hey, what happens now that if an Amazon warehouse shuts down, what's going to happen? Amazon is actually pushed to the brink, but they are actively hiring for people to help with that. Same thing with, I believe, other retail stores as well, such as I believe Target and Safeway and those type of places. There are businesses that are still hiring to kind of keep up with this man. So I wouldn't worry. I mean, obviously, this is a bad thing for anybody to be impacted by COVID-19. Unfortunately, that's an unfortunate thing for this worker. But Amazon's going to hopefully clean up their warehouse and still, they don't sense any real disruption in terms of a delivery of services. But you're right. There are look, we have a hard time keeping up with actual supplies that people need. So we're actually going to
Right.
suspend delivery to their warehouse, not suspend delivery to consumers, suspend delivery to warehouses of
Correct.
of other immaterial things that like in favor of cleaning supplies, groceries, those type of things that you actually will need at home.
Yeah, Amazon actually, I was taking a look here at the statement. I think they're looking to hire 100,000 people. So and they're also giving some pay raises as well. So they are going to be actively trying to make sure that we can keep that supply chain going. And what you said about their statements. So that's definitely a positive right there. Continuing on, let's talk about some other things that are being affected. Naturally, entertainment, and the way that's adapting is changing minute by minute. There was even some breaking news earlier today about this, but we see all the movie theaters, and those chains are shutting down, which is a primary driver for Hollywood when it comes to making their money. I think it was 42 or 48 billion dollars was actually in revenue was driven through those last year. So that's still a primary place, but they've got to figure out a different way to do this. It's either delaying movies, which we've seen like Fast and Furious, which is out I think about a year now, or just about a year. But you also have some other companies like Universal Pictures, which is going to be releasing some movies on demand and available for that way. So how they're all going to react is changing by the minute, but it's really a big change in how we get our entertainment since everybody's going online right now. It's pretty interesting.
Right, and streaming services, like with the launch, we were joking like many weeks ago, like, oh yeah, here's another streaming service from blah blah, NBC from
Ken
blah,
Plus.
Ken Plus, yes, got to go a week. You can't go a week without mentioning Ken Plus, But the thing is, now it's like, okay, it's kind of jokingly, joking aside, this is actually a pretty interesting move. Like, can production studios, can broadcast networks actually leverage their streaming services to get people out there? And I think it's a cost benefit analysis in terms of whether you want to abandon movie theaters, especially in this pandemic, to kind of get your movies out. Like, what's that marketing cost? What's the return on your investment? So you're right. I think a bigger name, blockbuster movies probably can hold off for a year, like Fast and Furious. But there's maybe some other movies where like maybe that's not something they want to really hold out for a year. Maybe they just want to get it out there because they have low expectations. So they might move it out to streaming. I think it's analogous to the back in the day when there was Blockbuster and everyone's doing VHS or DVDs, so like straight to DVD. It's like they bypass the movie theaters. So you kind of start to see some of that. Now we're talking about, I believe, Universal, AMC, all of them are making some of their movies available on demand. Sling is now opening up their service for expanding their trial, so you can be able to watch TV, streaming TV that way. Now, there's also a lot of movies that are coming out earlier, a lot of games as well. Animal Crossing and Doom Eternal came out a day earlier. I'm wondering, and Disney Plus is saying the Star Wars Rise of the Jedi and Frozen 2 came out, and there was one other movie. Onward is coming out early as well on Disney Plus. So there's a lot of movies that are coming out earlier and earlier, versus when they were actually supposed to be available. So this is actually going to be helping those that are working from home.
Just to alleviate some of the nerd cred, Rise of Skywalker. But there's also Disney, releasing that Pixar movie early. And I think one thing that you brought up there, too, is just extending these trials, which is great for everybody at home, too. If you're listening to this, obviously hit subscribe to the podcast. But these trial services that are going longer and longer, which kind of alleviate a lot of things. One, it'll get people in the door for some of these different streaming services, but also people need some entertainment. And that's a great way to get some entertainment right now. It's just fascinating how it's all changing. The whole landscape is mixing up as we go through. And I do want to see the Ken Plus service here at some point. This may be the time soon. Ken will have to let us know when that happens. But Ken, like you said at the beginning of this, we will be doing this show every single week. So we will be bringing you news and keeping you up to date. And thanks to everybody who does watch the show or subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate it. And Ken, as always, thank you so much.
Thanks, Greg. Stay safe.